Okay, so we're going to begin. Tonight's topic is about the anatomy of the human spirit. Several weeks ago we began a new series on Jewish mysticism. This is an area that is not very well understood, and I think people can gain a lot by having more clarity about certain areas of spirituality. Many of the concepts that I will mention tonight are Kabbalistic and may not be too familiar to you. Instead of repeating myself and explaining every single concept, I would encourage those who want to have more of an understanding of the definitions of the terminology is to listen to the lectures on Kabbalah that I gave many, many years ago. And they may be a little bit helpful, but I'll try to be simple and cover this very important topic. And I think that this is really an important topic because it's also an introduction to next week's topic, which is about holistic healing, alternative healing from the Kabbalistic perspective, from a spiritual perspective. So if you hear the lecture tonight, it will help you understand or relate better to the lecture next week. All of us live today in a very, very interesting time. We're all living in a generation that has seen many advances in medicine, many advances in technology, and when it comes to the human anatomy meaning the structure of the body, the limbs, the organs, the world, the medical field has gained tremendous clarity in being able to identify, to understand better this field called anatomy of the human body. They have also a better understanding of the physiology of the various organs. Physiology meaning how they interact, the functions of the various organs. Not only because they have dissected so many animals, but because they also have a lot of experience and they have the tools with which that they can diagnose and they can see very close hand what is going on in the human body and in the animal body. They've advanced so much that they've discovered the DNA. The DNA, which is pretty much the blueprint of what makes everything that we know of, what it consists of, what is its makeup. And it's something very, very small. But it basically contains the instructions of how a human being is made. What is he made out of? And the same with animals. Well, what's interesting is that scientists have remarked that human beings and apes, monkeys, are so similar. Some claim that over 98% of human DNA can be seen in the DNA of animals, certain animals, especially in the ape family. And what do you think some of them concluded from that? Well, possibly that means that we are related. That's what they think. Judging just by that alone, I don't think is a good idea. As many scientists will point out, even the 98% similarity is not certain. It all depends how you interpret it, what you count. It's a complex system. Yes, there are a lot of similarities. You can even see it. Physically, they look somewhat similar. But the similarities between the human being and animals in general don't have to do with the fact that they are related or not. They simply have to do because the same designer, the same architect created all of them and gave them similar organs. Whether you look at the heart of a whale, big heart, or you look at the organs, the intestines of a bird, and you look at the intestines of a human being, you will see certain similarities. The one who gave life created these organs to sustain life. They all have to survive, they all have to breathe and eat. So that makes more sense, especially if we accept the fact that there's a creator to the world. That therefore, yes, of course there will be similarities. That's only because it's the same architect who designed them all. You can tell sometimes when you go through one of the streets here, a lot of the homes look similar. And you can guess it could be the same developer. They have many, many things in common. But for some reason, the scientific world, and even those who are not scientists, are not focusing on the real difference between the human being and the animal. Where lies the real difference, regardless of the physical DNA? The real difference lies in the fact that the human being is endowed with a soul. The human being has a neshama. That is the essence of the human being, really. It's his soul. It's not his physical body, which is more like a vessel. This soul is divine. Chelek Eloka Mima'al, given to us by God. And how do you recognize that you have a soul? Is there any way you can tell? How do you detect that there is a soul? How do you dissect the human being and find out if he has a soul? It's not something that you can see with your physical eyes, but it's something that we can perceive. Perception is not visualizing it. Perception means that we reflect on certain capabilities that the human being has that the animal does not have, and we say to ourselves, wait a minute, the human being has something that the animal does not have. What is that? What does the human being have that the animal does not have? If I tell you a soul, you're going to ask me, well, prove it. Well, the human being has free will. The soul is detected by the fact that the human being can exercise free will. He can make decisions. Animals don't make decisions in the same way that human beings make decisions. They function by instinct alone. Instincts are not decisions. There's no process of evaluating a situation and deciding whether you're going to do it or not. The human being has that capability. So it's the free will. What else does the human being have? The ability of speech. Why didn't I say speech as number one? Because some scientists will claim, well, dolphins can also communicate, and so do some parrots, can mimic. But that's not the ability of speech in the same way that human beings have. What else does a human being have that we can tell? The conscience. We have a conscience. Sometimes something bothers us. Something tells us if this is right or if this is wrong. It may not be necessarily right or wrong. Obviously, everyone sees things according to their worldview, and according to their faith, and according to their upbringing. But still, there's a conscience that sometimes tells us that this is not right, or that this is right. That conscience comes from the neshama, from the soul. The soul is the one that is able to reflect on something, to think about it, to focus and concentrate. All of these qualities, all of these abilities do not exist in the animal kingdom. Well, since the human being is so unique and has these unique abilities, he was entrusted to take care of this physical world. He was entrusted to take care of nature. He's put into this world. Obviously, he needs to survive, but he's told, you take care of it. You are the boss. You can manage it if you choose to, or you can mismanage it. Unfortunately, many human beings, many civilizations have mismanaged the world through war and through all kinds of terrible decisions. But the human being is the one that's entrusted. He has unique abilities. Therefore, his decisions can make a world of a difference. How will the world look will depend on man's decisions, on man's free will. If you look at the animal kingdom, you will see a certain interdependency. That's called ecology. Certain animals depend on others. They eat them. They need them for their survival. That's called ecology. There's a certain interdependency between the animals. They all have a function, they all serve some purpose, and they're all dependent on each other to an extent. What they all have in common, however, is that they were created to serve mankind. We need them. They help us in all kinds of ways. Look at the burro. You know what a burro is? A donkey in Spanish. It helps man in many ways carry heavy loads. The horse doesn't do what a donkey does. The donkey doesn't do what a horse does. Right? The two are very helpful. Just two examples of how animals serve mankind, and they have always, since the dawn of history. We've used them in many, many ways. All right, if that's the case, then is it possible that man himself serves someone too? Or does he serve himself only? Is life only about him? The greatest weakness, or if you want to call it the greatest fault that the human being has, is that he forgets that in the same way animals were created to serve him, to help him, he also has someone to serve, someone to look up to, someone that he depends on, and that is the Creator, Hashem. But for some reason he forgets that. And that's part of the lecture. Why do human beings forget this very, very important idea that we're here, we were given life for some reason, and part of our job is to recognize our boss. We have a boss too. And part of our job is to serve him. Why is it that we forget that? In other words, our fault is that we actually can easily forget. It's a weakness that human beings have. For some reason, we can easily forget this very, very important detail. But before we can understand, before we can know what man needs to do, or what he needs to know to be able to succeed in life, to serve Hashem properly, I think it is better for us to begin with what makes him forget. Because if he wouldn't forget, he wouldn't have a problem. Problems begin because human beings forget. They get all tied up with themselves, with their lives, and they forget what they're here for. Imagine somebody going on a bus and you asking him, "Sir, where are you going?" "I don't know." "So what do you mean, you got on a bus and you don't know where you're going?" Well, ask the average individual, where are you headed in life? What are you here for? Why did you arrive? "Oh, it's my parents' fault." People don't think too much about it. What are you doing? What, besides eating and drinking and sleeping? Where are you headed? What do you want to accomplish that's meaningful? Not what do you want to do for a living. That's called survival. What are you here for? It can't just be to eat and to survive. Why'd you come? So for some reason we forget. Do we really know? Yes, it is possible to know. We'll talk a little bit about that. But first, let's figure out, why does the human being forget who he is? After all, we just said he's special. He has unique abilities. That means he has unique powers. So the Kabbalah teaches as follows. If you look at creation, you will notice duality. You know what duality means? There's sets. Sets of twos, sets of fours. Interesting sets. The more common duality that we are familiar with is Yom Valayla, day and night. Zachar v'nekeva, male and female. Right? What else?
Good and bad.
What is that?
Good and bad.
Well, that's morality. We'll talk about that later. But that's physically obvious to us. Look at the human body. Don't we have, for some reason, 2 hands? We have 2 feet, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils. Thank God we only have 1 mouth. Oy, oy, oy. What would happen if people would have 2 mouths? But Baruch Hashem, we're thankful that we have what we have. We need them, we use them, but there's duality. That's in the human body. What about spiritually? In the human being, there's also 2 parts to him. Spiritually, there is a guf and a neshama. There's the physical body that we just mentioned, but there's also a soul. Again, a duality. 2. One of this and one of that. What about the various powers in the world? There's positive and negative. You've heard of that? That's also duality. Davar v'hipucho. 2 things that are opposite. 2 things that are very different. In the spiritual world, there's also what you began to say, good and bad. It is called benevolent and malevolent. These forces, the good and the bad. and some might add a third, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But basically we have two very different opposing forces. One is good and one is bad. One is benevolent, one is malevolent. How are these forces known to us in Judaism? Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and the evil inclination. What else? If you dig deeper into the Kabbalah teaches that there's also Kochot HaKdusha and Kochot HaTumah. There is the pure forces, and they are the forces or the powers of impurity, the Sitra Achara, which we'll talk about a couple of weeks from now when we talk about witchcraft and the evil eye in all sorts of impure forces. Why do they exist? Why were they created? But they exist too. So you have the good and the bad, you have the holy and the unholy, the pure and the impure. Then there's a concept in the Kabbalah called Sefirot. For those of you who studied Kabbalah, the Sefirot are the emanations of God. How God interacts with this world, how he conducts himself, through all kinds of midot, through all kinds of attributes. If you look at the figure, even though there's no real figure, but if you look at a drawing of what the Sefirot look like, more or less, not that you're getting an image of any, there's no image, but an outline of how they are, you will see a right and left. You will see Chesed, you will see Gevurah, you will see Tiferet in between them. At the top, at the head, you will see Keter, Chochmah, Binah, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, right? You recall something like that? Those are the Sefirot. A very important fundamental concept in the Kabbalah of how Hashem interacts with this world. On the one hand, there is compassion. On the other hand, there is justice. One is flowing, one is restrictive. And then there is a balance of Tiferet between the right and the left. And these are emanations of God, of how he interacts in this world. So again, we have a certain duality, even though Hashem is only one, but somehow, for some reason, everything appears in sets, because there is a right and there is a left. Two very different types of powers, two different kinds of forces, which are seen in the various areas of life. Anybody here ever heard of yin and yang? The Chinese, right? They have this concept of yin and yang, and this is very similar. Two very different kinds of powers. Even though they all agree that the two are necessary, need each other, work together in a sense, nonetheless, they're very, very different.
In Persian medicine also there is this concept of Sadi and Garbi.
Yeah, of course, yeah, that's right, very true, yeah. How about the human being? Where do we see the Sefirot in the human being himself? The human being, the rabbis tell us, is a microcosm. Olam Katan. He's a reflection of the bigger world. You see a small world in him. So where do you see the Sefirot in him? We said 2 hands, but there are 10 fingers. Did you wonder why 10 and not 9? Why not 12? 12 would be actually be a nicer number, no? 6, you can do more. For some reason, no, we don't really know the reasons, but we see a correlation. We see a kesher. We see, interesting, how the Sefirot are 10 and the fingers are 10. 5 on each hand. So we have the 2 sides, the 2 hands. Each hand has 5 fingers. And I'm going to talk about the 5 soon. But together, man conducts himself, or how he deals with work and other areas in his life, through 10 fingers. In the same way that Hashem interacts with this world with 10 Sefirot, man deals with his 10 fingers. And where is the head? On top. The head is not on the foot, right? Even though some people don't think with their head, right? But the head is supposed to be the most important part of the body. That is why it's on top. That is why the eyes are in the head. The eyes could see the higher part of the body. In the same way with the Sefirot, you have the head of the Sefirot on top. You have the Keter, the Chochmah and Binah. They are the head. That is where thought comes from. That is where knowledge comes from the top. Keter is the actual point of where it all goes through from the throne of God. But it comes down into Chokhmah. Chokhmah is how it presents itself to us. And Binah is how we evaluate it and how we analyze it. We're given that ability too. It's not just raw knowledge. So there's a right and there's a left. The right, as I will explain soon, is where it flows from. The left is more of a receiving end. And the same all the way down, as you go down the Sefirot. Something flows, something comes out, and then something receives it or stops it or restricts it. If you go further into the human body, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you will find something amazing. We don't have the time to go through all the many examples, but I'll just share one more. The brain. Have you ever seen a brain? A real human brain? Yeah? A human brain is a very, very complex organ. The most complex of all, the most important of all. All the decisions go through the brain. The brain regulates your heart, your breathing. That is where our thoughts go through, our memory bank, the ability of language. So much happens in the brain. The brain is also, for some reason, divided in two. It has two hemispheres, the right and the left. I'm talking about what's called the cortex, the top. If you look at the brain from the top, you will see two hemispheres, two parts, two sides. And what's interesting about the brain is, besides two hemispheres, it has four basic or important parts to it. The bigger one, the more important one, is called the cerebrum. And this cerebrum also, for some reason, has four lobes. Remember we talked about four? Some reason fours. Sets of twos, fours. For some reason, there's some significance to these numbers. What else do we have? We have the cerebrum, we have the cerebellum, we have the diencephalon, and we have the brain stem. So four parts. And the cerebrum itself has four lobes. Each one of these parts, or each one of the lobes, has different functions that they have discovered. Each one handles a different part of the body, different functions of the body. It's just interesting that they are divided the way they are. But why four? I just said four. Four is a number that is seen a lot in the Kabbalah. For example, you have the Arba Yesodot. Man is created from the four elements. Remember? You have the fire, the air, the water, the earth. Four elements, the whole creation is made from four elements. And the human being also consists of four elements. He is also made of the four elements. So you have here a reflection of four. Four in the brain, four the elements. What else is four? The name of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei has four letters. Plus the Kotso Shel Yud, the dot of the Yud, which I'm going to explain soon. We have the Yud, right? Then we have the Hey, then we have the Vav, then we have the second Hey. Four letters. What do they represent? Is it possible that there's a correlation between the four letters, the four elements, the four parts of the brain, the four lobes in the brain? Maybe. Apparently, the Kabbalah says yes. There's definitely a correlation. The numbers here are not b'mikre. The numbers that we see, and we're going to be talking about numerology, numbers that appear in Judaism, the significance of 6, the significance of 7, what do they represent? Why do we have 10 emanations? 10 fingers. So here we have 4. 4 is important because it's related to the 4 letters of Hashem. So the rabbis tell us that you see from all of this that ha'adam hu olam katan. Man is a microcosm. He's a small little world. Everything that you see in the world, you see in him. The eyes, the pupil at least, the iris, circular like the planets. Man has fluids like the oceans of the world. There's a lot in the earth, in the world, that can be seen in the human being. That is how the Kabbalah explains it, that man is like a small little world. And when we talk about palmistry, the lines in the hand, I'll elaborate a little bit more what I mean, as well as astrology, how we can see that all of these powers and influences out there exists in the human being, how they imprint themselves in him, where you can actually see it. You don't necessarily have to look to the sky to know certain things. You can look at the human being. Today, for example, they say that by looking at the nails or by looking at the eyes, you can detect or see certain illnesses that the individual may have. There are certain things in the human body that give away what he is suffering from without opening him up, right? Without diagnosing, without taking his blood. There's certain things that you can tell from the outside. The human being, however, is not just physical. We said before, there's something spiritual about him. He has two kohot. He has the koach haruchani, the spiritual force, which comes from the neshama, and he has the physical force. Why is that? Because he has been given the ability not only to manage this world, but he has the ability to even connect to the spiritual world. How man connects to the spiritual world is an incredible topic. A very, very interesting topic. How do you connect to the spiritual world? I briefly mentioned a dream in one of the lectures, if you recall, where you can get a glimpse of something that your eyes physically don't see. A dream. And there's a whole lecture about dreams. What do dreams mean? Not all dreams are real, but I'm talking about the real dreams, where you can see something in the future, where you can see something that is happening to a friend of yours, that perhaps you're given a chance to warn him. There's all kinds of dreams. We're talking about the spiritual realm. Dream is not in the physical world, even though it's happening to us while we're alive, but we're not awake. I know some people are daydreaming. That's something else. But a real dream is usually at night, when the physical body is at rest. All of a sudden, the spiritual part of this individual awakens and is able to see and know certain things, whether it's about the future or about all kinds of things that are not known to him. How could he know these things? How is it possible for one who left this world to appear to someone in a dream, talking to him as though he was alive? Sometimes, by the way, we know that he's not alive. Sometimes we think that he's still alive. We forget that he's gone. All of this happens in a spiritual realm. The neshama, the soul within us, is able to channel this. Not the physical body, because we don't see it with our physical eyes. There's something in us that is able to connect. And how one can do that, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk about another time. So getting back to the numbers are not by chance. The numbers that we have that appear in Judaism represent different concepts. So we have like this, we have the 4 letters of Hashem. They correspond, according to the Kabbalah, to the 4 worlds. There are 4 worlds that Hashem created. Abiyah is the abbreviation. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah. On the highest level, Atzilut, in other words, that is the highest of highest. That is a place where there are no angels. There's Beriah, creation, Yetzirah, formation, Asiyah, which is the physical world. Each level or each world contains different creations of God. Abiyah, it's abbreviated, the 4 worlds. So these 4 worlds correspond to the letters of Hashem. Why did he have to have 4? We don't know. All we know is that the Kabbalah explains that each one serves a purpose. You have 4 levels in creation. In the physical creation, you have 4 levels of beings. You have Domem, Tzomeach, Chai, Medaber. If you heard of that, Domem is those that are inanimate. Inanimate object is a rock. What's one level higher than the rock? Tzomeach, that which is vegetative or plant life. It's one level above. What's one level above that? Chai, animals, that which is alive, has life. And then there's medaber, the ability of speech. That's the human being. He's the highest level of all. Again, you have four categories, 4 levels, 4 worlds, 4 letters of Hashem. There's a certain connection between them. They relate to each other. They represent something. Then we have the soul, the neshama. People hear neshama, they hear nefesh, and they get confused. Which one is what? Nefesh is usually translated in English as spirit. A nefesh ha-behemi, the animal spirit. And sometimes we hear the term neshama. Neshama means soul. Alma in Spanish. What are the differences? I've covered that in another lecture, but basically what you have is 5. You will hear nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Well, all of a sudden we have the number 5. But remember I told you before we have 5 fingers. So there's a significance to the number 5 too. Even though 4 are the 4 letters of Hashem, somehow you have 5 here. So what did we say before? Besides the 4 letters of Hashem, you have the kotso shel yud. You have the little dot hanging down from the yud. When you write a yud in the Sefer Torah, to write it properly, you have to not just draw the yud, you have to draw the little dot that extends from that letter. And that dot represents the Kisei HaKavod. That dot represents the origin of everything. So you have the Yud Kei Vav Kei, you have the 4 letters of Hashem, but you also have that Kutso Shel Yud. And that's seen in the 5 levels of the Neshama. Most of us will not come across the Chaya and Yechida. Those are parts of the soul that we have no understanding of how they function. They are more at the root level. We are more familiar, somewhat more familiar, with Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. So let's just call them levels. Even though the essence of the human being is his Neshama, that's the soul can divide itself. When we spoke about reincarnation, you may recall, I said that a Neshama can come back many, many times. But wait a minute, who's going to get up when the dead will rise? There's only one individual here. But the answer is they all rise, if they all are meritorious. Why? Because the soul is like a candle. How many candles can you light with the original candle? 1,000. Take the original candle and light as many as you want. You will not diminish the original one. A soul can split itself. And in the Kabbalah they're called sparks, or parts of the soul. So you can have many, many individuals who belong to the same root of the soul, to the same soul. That's the soul. The soul can split itself. Then you have the ruach, which is the spirit, and then you have the animal spirit called the nefesh. These 3, nefesh, ruach, neshama, are the ones that are more commonly seen in Kabbalistic texts, and they are the ones that we more or less can identify with. And it's important to understand a little bit what they are, so that we can have more clarity next week when we talk about holistic healing or alternative healing, which has not only to do with the physical body, but has to also do with the spirit. We need to not only be physically healthy, we want our soul to be healthy. After all, they're both together during our lifetime. So what part of the soul are we talking about? What is the exact function of each one? Why is it important that we understand what the nefesh does, the ruach and the neshama? But to make things simple, just think about nefesh or neshama. Don't think about the various types or levels, because it's a little confusing. We have something spiritual, and it's called a nefesh, a spirit, or a neshama, a soul. But they are different. What else do we have? 5? The 5 senses. We have the hearing ability, we have the seeing ability, the visual, right? What else? We have the touch, the taste, and the smell. This is very important in understanding how tefillin works. Why do we put on tefillin on our head and on our hand? What exactly we're accomplishing? We'll talk about that next week with Zad Hashem. the significance of the five senses. You have actually, the head has the various compartments. In the hand, all the parshiot are in one compartment. So we'll talk about the various compartments in the head and the hand, what they signify. But again, we see the number here. We see either a 4 or altogether 5 relating to the senses in the physical body. Okay, what we've done so far is talk about various aspects of the human body, whether physical or spiritual. But now we've come to the most important, not only aspect, but the most important koach, the most important power that the human being has. And that is the ability to give and to receive. The reason I call that the most important or the most significant power is because that's what the human being is really all about. He can give, but he also can receive. It's about giving and receiving. And that is exactly the way the creation works. The creation is one act of love, of giving from Hashem. Hashem doesn't need to have a world. He didn't have to create anything. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need human beings. If you think about it, what did he create the world for? What does he get out of it? So Hashem is only about giving. But if he gives, he has to have recipients. Who is he going to give it to? Human beings, the world is on the receiving end. However, even though we are receiving from him, we were also given the ability to be givers, if we choose to. Some people are selfish. They want everything from themselves. They are takers, receivers, and not givers. But the human being has that ability, a very significant ability, to emulate his creator by being a giver. And how did this all happen? The way this happens, the Kabbalah explains is as follows. Think of Hashem as an eternal light, as it's called in the Kabbalah, Ein Sof. Eternal life, even though Hashem has no physical description, but the Kabbalah explains that he's Ein Sof, he's eternal. And there's a light, a spiritual light, that permeates everything in creation. The divine presence, the Shekhinah, however you want to call it. In order to create a physical world that has limitations, it's physical, it's limited, Hashem had to constrict or limit his light. That's called Tzimtzum in the Kabbalah. So when that light was constricted, it was able to be contained in a keli, a vessel, a cup, right, is a vessel. You can contain liquid in it. So all this light is now being able to be contained in a vessel, which is the physical world. Why did Hashem want to create this vessel? And why did Hashem do it in such a way that the light had to enter this vessel? What is this light and vessel all about? Well, let's look at the human being once again. What will we see in the human being? We will see a vessel, a physical body that can have pleasure. Hashem wanted human beings to be able to enjoy, to be able to derive pleasure. And he made them a keli, he made them or gave them a vessel which can enjoy, can benefit, derive enjoyment. That's the vessel, that's the physical vessel. But he also gave the light. The neshama, as we said before, is from him. The neshama is spiritual. The neshama is a part of him. So if the vessel is to be able to enjoy all that there is to enjoy, what is the light for? The light for is to be able to know him, to be able to realize that there's a God in this world, and to enable us to be a little bit like him, to be good, to be kind, to be givers. So the light is a spiritual koach, a spiritual power, that can enable the human being to elevate himself to a level where he can emulate. That is why Adam in Hebrew is called Adam, one of the reasons, because Adameh le'elyon. I can resemble my maker. I can emulate his ways. Man can be a mini creator when he procreates. I call him a copy machine. He copies himself and he brings children into the world. How does he do that? It's amazing. Even though animals do that too. To procreate, that's an incredible ability that Hashem endowed human beings and animals alike, all of creation, with this ability to copy themselves. There's something that we have that resembles him, even though we're nothing like him, but he gave us certain abilities that come from him. So the spiritual in the human being is to emulate his ways. The physical is the body that can enjoy all that there is to enjoy. So that is how this came about. In the Kabbalah, we said before that there is a balance. Remember, there's a right, there's a left. There is the compassion, and there is the justice, harsh justice. Then there's tiferet, one example of a balance that harmonizes between the two sides. How does it harmonize? Sometimes Hashem is tolerant with the wicked, even though the attribute of justice should punish and stop the evil. Hashem sometimes tolerates it and says, you know what, this individual may one day repent, may one day change. The kids that are going to come out of this union, him and his wife, will be good kids, so I don't want to remove him from this world for now. For all kinds of reasons, there is tiferet that harmonizes between compassion and justice. Let's wait. Let's have mercy on him, even though he doesn't deserve it. There's one that is deserved, and there's one that is not deserved, but it's for some other reason. There needs to be a balance. If the world would only run on justice, the world cannot exist for too long. That is why the flood, the big flood of Noah, in the very beginning, was an example of what the world will look like every time there's justice. It can't go on like that. So God is telling us in the very beginning of creation, I'm not going to continue to do it this way. Neither can I be only compassionate, because it's about free will. You have to earn your own reward for the world to come. So I have to give you free will. That free will that the human being has is the balance between the ability of doing right and the ability of doing wrong. So we have both. We have the two sides, right and left, right? Two hands, remember? We have the ruach, or the neshama, and the guf. Two very opposites. One is spiritual, divine, and one is physical. Two very, very different interests. But Hashem says, wait a minute, don't think that you're going to have this continuous conflict of what to do, which is what we have all the time. You will have the ability of choosing. You will be given free will. And you will make up your mind. You will decide what you want to do, what you want to be. So that free will acts like a balance. In the same way that in the Sefirot you have a balance, you have to have a balance. It's not fair. If the human being was a saint, a tzaddik, and it wouldn't be fair if he's just evil all the time either. I mean, he's all physical. There has to be something that will balance, that will give him a fair chance to choose between right and wrong. So what do we get from all of this? What we get is perhaps the wrong impression. The impression that the human being has so many unique abilities, he's so capable, he's intelligent, he can speak, he can communicate, he can run this world, he can destroy this world. He must be perfect. But we know that's not true. The human being is very far from being perfect. Why? Well, if you look at Bereshit, Genesis, in the very beginning of the Torah, you will see that when Hashem creates the world, for some reason he says after everything he made, it's tov, it's good. Remember? Vayar Hashem ki tov, Hashem sees, it's good. Why tell us it's good? You made it. Okay, it must be good. No, I'm telling you this is good. Because when it comes to the creation of man, no mention of tov. Everything is tov, everything is good. Man is not tov. Why? What is tov? What is good? If I ask you what is good, you'll tell me what you think is good. For us, tov, good, is relative. Some people like peanut butter. Some people like jelly. And I discovered that in this country, some people like peanut butter together with jelly. I don't understand how. But the rabbis tell us, don't argue about tastes. You know, people have different tastes. This guy likes this. You know, in Mexico, it's so funny, you know, if you ever go there, you will see they put chile, Hot sauce on everything, even on oranges, on soup. Everything has chile. And for some people, even for people from Guatemala, from Central America and South America, they don't understand what is he doing. That's taste. They got used to it. There's something very tasty actually called mole. It's a hot sauce, but it's not completely hot. It has chocolate inside. Hot sauce, but it has chocolate. Very tasty. But anyway, people have different tastes. So what is good? It's all relative for us. What is really good? 100% good? The Torah tells us. The Torah says, for something to be intrinsically good, it has to be shalem, perfect. It has to be tachliti. It serves the ultimate purpose of creation. And number 3, we need it. We need it. If we don't need it, then it's, it's not that. More or less, these are the 3 characteristics of something that is really, really good. The human being, for some reason, is told in the very beginning, I'm sorry, you're not complete. You're not so good yet. Because being good or not will be up to you. That's the main decision that you're going to be making in life. Who you're going to marry is not going to be your decision, really. Who your soulmate is designated above. How much money you're going to earn is part of your mazal, part of your qismat, right? Part of your fate and destiny. Whether you win in court or not also doesn't depend on you, doesn't depend on the lawyer either, right? There's something called mazal. What depends on the human being? Where does he have free will? In very, very few areas. Whether he will be righteous or wicked, whether he will do good or bad. This is pretty much what is up to him. Will he be a good man or not? That's up to him. So whether he becomes good or not is up to him. All babies are cute, I think, right? Everybody's arguing about who does he look like or who does she look like, and everybody's so happy, and we all are happy. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, that the mother delivered and the boy is healthy, or the girl is healthy and the mother is healthy, and everybody's happy. But you know that little baby may one day turn out to be a monster. Chaz v'shalom, God forbid. A criminal. A total disgrace to the family. Who knows? You don't know. It's up to that child. Hopefully he will have a good upbringing, good education, but more important than that, hopefully he or she will make the right decisions. That depends on him or her. When can we say Tov? When we eulogize them. When we go to the eulogy, we go to the funeral, this was a good man, this was a good woman. As Shlomo Melech says, Solomon says, Tov Shem Mishem and Tov, v'yom ha'mavet miyom hivaledo. A good name is more important than anything else. And the day of death is better than the day of birth. Why? Because at the day of death, you can see what man or woman accomplished. When they're born, everybody's so excited, yeah, but you don't know. What are they going to make of themselves? So man is not complete. Man cannot be said to be good unless he chooses throughout his life to do the right thing, to complete himself. So, since man is incomplete, he has to be told, however, there is a way you can become complete. And how is that? By recognizing the one who is complete, and that is Hashem. Hashem is the one who's ultimately complete. And if you decide to come close to Him, to have a connection with Him, to be close to Him, then you will be attaching yourself to the ultimate good. And you will be good. And you will become good. So the way or the path to becoming a righteous, good person is by connecting to Hashem, by recognizing the one who is complete. If you recognize Him, who is the ultimate in being complete, then there's a chance that you will be able to attach yourself to Him and be complete. So now we've come to the question that we started with. What makes man forget this? Why can't people just remember this and strive for this and want this all their life? I have a secret to tell you. Even though we've spoken a lot about the evil and bad and good inclinations, that's too simplistic. If somebody tells me, the answer is, there's an evil inclination. No, I have a better word for it. A word that even scientists will like. What makes the human being fail, what makes the human being forget about his creator and maker, it's called gravity. Have you heard about gravity? You know, you throw up an apple and it will fall down. Gravity can be seen in many areas. It can be seen in this physical world. It can be even seen in outer space. Gravity is something that is used by certain rockets on certain missions to certain planets. They want to get a boost and be able to travel farther. They need to sometimes get a little bit of the pull of one of the planets in the neighborhood to be able to send them off to a greater distance. Gravity is seen in many areas, and it's a fascinating force that's out there. And I say that this is the same force that affects human beings. Why? Because what is the human being made out of? Part of him is physical. Chomer, his body, that vessel. He will gravitate. He will gravitate naturally to that which is physical because part of him is physical. He will gravitate more to that which is physical. And I'll explain why more to the physical. But that's what happens. He just gravitates. Unless you hold him, unless you hold the reins, he will gravitate. Why did I say reins? Because there's a beautiful parable, beautiful mashal, that the Chafetz Chaim, I believe, used once in explaining why people just gravitate to do the wrong things, to do that which the body wants and not the neshama. There was once a businessman who set out on a long journey, and he tells the driver, the one who's leading the horses, in those days they had, a wagon and horse. He says, listen, I'm very tired, I'm going to fall asleep. Just make sure that you stay awake and that the horses don't go off the way, off the path. So the driver tells him, don't worry, everything will be okay, you can go to sleep. And he fell asleep. What happened after a while is that the driver also fell asleep. And after the driver fell asleep, the horse saw some fresh grass on the side of the road and decided to turn off the road. And the whole wagon flipped over. And they all fell into the mud and got bruised. The businessman got upset. I told you, watch out, pay attention. So the driver tells the businessman, but I don't understand. This horse is a smart horse. He knows the way out pretty much blindly. I don't understand what happened. He says, you're a fool. How could you say a horse is smart? A horse, as soon as it sees fresh grass, that's all it's going to think about. That's all it wants and cares about. It doesn't care about you. You have to hold on to the reins, otherwise it's going to go off the path. That's what animals are all about. That's what they care about. That's what they think about. And that's exactly what happens with the human being. I mean, the physical part of the human being is just drifting from time to time after that which is physical in nature. That's what it wants. That's what it craves. Unless you hold the reins tight. I haven't told you what those reins are yet, but that's the idea here. If you don't hold on to the reins tight, people are going to go after that which is physical, whether it's money, whether it's food, whether it's all the other temptations in life. And they're going to get into trouble many times because of that. So what can the human being do to help him? What can the human being do to help himself? Some of it I'm going to leave for next week. But for now, I'm just going to give you one idea. There's a very important pasuk in Yov. Yov in English is Job. And he says like this, Mi besari eheze eloka. I can see from my own flesh God. What does he mean? I can see from my own flesh. So briefly, because I'm going to expound it more next week, he says that there's a lot the human being can see about God from his own physical body. If he were to look at his body, analyze it, think about it, he will come to a certain understanding of God, of what God expects of him. One of those things that he will notice, if he looks carefully, closely, is that somehow this physical body, it just eats. And after eating, whether it's 4 hours, 5 hours, what happens? The body somehow has a system of expelling that which it does not want, that which is no good for the body. In other words, the body, after consuming food and drink, derives whatever it needs, the nutrients it needs for the body, and after some hours, it somehow automatically gets rid of the psolet, as we call it in Hebrew, of the impurities. Interesting. How does it know to do that? What a machine, an incredible machine that automatically works like that. What is that supposed to tell us? The human being has to understand from this, if my physical body can do this, then kol sheken, the more so, my neshama, who has great abilities and understanding, should be able to sift and separate the good from the bad. My body automatically does it. That means there's something that is not good for it. Not everything is good. And the body somehow automatically, we don't even have to push buttons, it happens. It just comes out. The human being can learn from his flesh. He can see godliness. He can see what is expected of him, why he was created in such a way. Perhaps his tafkid, his job, is also to separate the good from the bad. And one who does that, and one who is in control of that, and knows very well how to do that, will be able to maintain not only his physical health, but his spiritual health as well. And how to go about that, we will discuss next week. But that is just one idea that he can see from his flesh. The gravity, however, is so strong in the physical body, because the nefesh that we spoke about at the lowest level is called the nefesh behemi. It is the spiritual, or the animalistic spirit, I should say, that is closest to the body. So even though it's spirit, even though it's spiritual in nature, but it's so closely attached to the body that it has all kinds of needs and all kinds of issues. When I say issue, I mean jealousy and anger. Where does that come from? That's not something physical. That is also spiritual. It's a sensation, right? That comes from a very low level of the neshama, being so attached to the bodily needs that it expresses anger or jealousy. If a person were to be in tune or in touch with a higher level of his neshama, he wouldn't think of anything like that. He would make fun of people who go after money or food. He says, what's this all about? That's not what I'm here for. That's not what life is all about. But the lower level nefesh gravitates to the behemah, to the animal, to the vessel that is physical, because it's so close to it. It's so attached to it. And that is why, unless somehow we hold the reins very, very tight, that is what it's going to do. And it's therefore going to forget about his maker. So what do we do, therefore, to put the reins on this nefesh habehemi? I'll just end with one idea that can help us understand how we can do it, but I won't give you the details now, just how it works. The Nefesh HaChaim, a great rabbi by the name of Rav Chaim of Volozhin, mentions the following Gemara that explains this idea more in depth. It says, God gave his name to the Jewish nation. El, Aleph Lamed, is one of the names of Hashem. He attached it to the Jewish people, Israel. Why? Because he said like this, if I leave them to their own devices and let them just manage on their own, they will forget their identity. They will be completely assimilated and disappear. I will therefore attach my name to them. Mashal lema davar domeh, what is this compared to? This is compared to a king who had a small key. And he said, if I just put away the small key to my palace in my pocket, it may be lost easily. I'm going to attach that key to a chain. And in this way, I will not lose it. So the Aleph Lamed attached to the Jewish nation is, in a way, a chain that it connects them to above, that somehow enables them not to disappear. As we can see till today, they have not disappeared. The rabbi goes on to say, the same is true not just with the Jewish nation, with every human being on earth. this key. What is this key? This key is what Hashem gave every human being to be able to save himself from the animal in him. Without a chain to above, without a chain connecting the neshama, ruach, and nefesh, then the lowest level nefesh will succumb to the behemiyut, to the animal part in him, will succumb to the physical body, will lose himself, and will not realize what he's here for. Therefore, I'm going to give him the key. And this key, if he uses it right, will be able to open the palace down here and the palace above. The human being has been given a key through which he's able to affect the physical world and the spiritual world. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. I can affect the spiritual world. We talked about how man can affect the physical world. Yes, but we will learn how he can do that in the spiritual world another time. But he needs the key for that. That key is spirituality. That key is godliness. That key is what connects all the levels of the neshama to his body. If he has that key, then even if he succumbed, even if he made a mistake, the higher levels of his soul will be able to extricate him. Which is what teshuvah is all about, repenting. To be extricated, you need some power, some very powerful force. And that is spirituality, that is godliness. So that is the key that Hashem gave every human being to be able, if he chooses to extricate himself. Connect yourself to him, and you will be able to extricate yourself. Even if you've fallen to the depths, to the abyss, and have become so distant from whatever you're supposed to accomplish, it's never too late. You can always make a U-turn. You can always come back if you use the key. We all have the key, not everybody uses it. That's the problem. So that is why awareness is so important. People need to be made aware of the tremendous powers that the human being has. And if he makes use of them, he will become a truly good person, a righteous man, and a devout servant, B'ezrat Hashem of Elokim. Amen.